Hello, Dr. Sushma Singh this side. Today in Unit 13, Agrarian Classes and Categories, we are going to conclude the lesson in this lecture. Agrarian classes and categories are societies which depend largely on the agriculture as their main source of sustenance. As we read in the above this unit, agrarian settlements and grouping of people depend for their livelihood on cultivating land and by carrying out related activities such as animal husbandry. Like all other economic activities, agricultural production is obviously an economic activity and as such is carried out in a framework of social relationships. Those involved in cultivation of land also interact with each other in different social capacities. Not only do they interact with each other but also with other categories of people who provide them with different types of services required for cultivation of land. The social, economic, and cultural interaction of different classes and categories of people takes place in an institutionalized framework. The most important aspect of the institutional setup of agrarian societies is the pattern of land ownership and the nature of relationship among those who own or know or possess land and those who till the land or do the actual cultivation. The form of employment of labor and the nature of relationship that labor has with their employer, farmers or landowners are important aspects of a given agrarian structure. We learnt in the above unit that those who own land invariably command a considerable degree of power and prestige in rural society. These sets of relationship among the owners of the land and those who provide various forms of services in the land-owning group or work with them for a wage could be described as the agrarian class structure. Then what is a class? The views of leading scholars and thinkers like Karl Marx and Max Weber vary on this issue. Class for Marx is a dichotomous one. He says that in every class society there are two fundamental classes. Property relations constitute the main criteria on the basis of this dichotomous system. For Max Weber, class depends on the market situation or the purchasing power of a person. The class status of the person also determines his or her life chances. Thus, in Weberian framework, the concept of class could not be applied to pre-capitalist peasant society where market is the only peripheral phenomena. In comparison, the concept of class is applicable to all surplus producing societies. The social structures of agrarian societies are, however, marked with diversities of various kinds. The nature of agrarian class structure varies from region to region. In recent times, the agrarian structures in most societies are undergoing fundamental transformations. In most developed societies of the West, agriculture has become a marginal sector of the economy, employing only a very small population of their working population. In the third world too, the ratio of population dependent on agriculture has begun to decline, but it still employs considerable sections of the population. There is an influential group of scholars in the field of agrarian studies who are critical of analyzing agrarian societies in class terms. Peasant societies for them are a type of population fundamentally different from the modern urban industrial society. Then we learnt about the classical notion of undifferentiated peasant society. This notion developed during the post-war period after 1945. It was largely derived from the Western experience. A typical peasant society was seen to be pre-industrial in nature. As the economics developed with the onset of the Industrial Revolution, the traditional peasant way of life gradually began to change, giving way to modern urban lifestyles. Theodor Shanin developed an ideological type of peasant society. He defined peasant as small agricultural producers who, with the help of the simple equipment and the labor of their families, produced mostly for their own consumption, direct or indirect, and for the fulfillment of the obligations to the holders of political and economic power. The historical literature on different regions of the world tends to show that the agrarian societies were not as homogeneous as they are made out of to be in such formulation. Agrarian societies were also internally differentiated in different strata. In India, for example, the rural society was divided between different caste groups, and only some groups had the right to cultivate land, while others were obliged to provide services to the cultivators. Similarly, parts of Europe had serfdom, where the overlords dominated the peasantry. Such societies were also known as feudal societies. With the success of industrial revolution during the 18th and the 19th century, feudal societies disintegrated, giving way to the development of modern capitalist economies. However, over the years, the term feudalism has also come to acquire a generic meaning and is frequently used to describe the pre-modern agrarian societies in other parts of the world besides Europe. This unit also discussed the kinds of fundamental transformations that have taken place in contemporary agrarian societies. Increased mechanization of the agriculture, advanced technology, and communication have all led to a shift in the pattern of social network of interaction. Increased yield due to the intervention of science and technology, improved seeds, etc., led to a situation where surplus food is generated. The idea of cash crops is introduced, which further increase the distance between the rich and the poor. Therefore, social inequalities increases, feudal values are lost or declines, but instead market relations take over in the rural agriculture sector. The attitude of the peasants towards their occupation also undergoes a change. As we read earlier, in the pre-capitalist and traditional societies, the peasant produced mainly for their own consumption. The work in the fields was carried out with the labor of their family. Agriculture for the peasantry was both a source of livelihood as well as a way of life. But in modern times, landowners began to look at agriculture as an enterprise. They were on their farms with modern machines and produce cash crops which fetch higher prices in the market and therefore generate more money. Thus, the profit motive becomes part of agricultural enterprise. Lenin and Mao, two well-known leaders from Russia and China, suggested that with the development of capitalism in agriculture, the peasantry that was hitherto an undifferentiated social category gets differentiated or divided into various social classes. On the basis of their experience, they identified different categories of peasants respectively in Russia and China and the nature of relations the different categories had with each other. However, that actual experience of capitalist development in agriculture in different parts of the world does not seem to entirely comfort to Lenin's predictions. There is very little evidence to support the argument that the Agrarian population is getting polarized into two classes. In the West, as in the third world countries, the middle and small size cultivators have not only managed to survive, but in some countries like India, their numbers have increased. Traditionally, agrarian societies in India were marked by a pattern or relationship called Jajmani system, where the different classes were interdependent on each other in terms of service. The landowners were the patron or judgmans, and the service providers caste were the kamins, such as the caste of carpenters, ironsmith, etc. But gradually, after independence, this system has declined. The two significant reasons which led to this decline were the abolition of Zamindari system and the Green Revolution. The process of modernization and development initiated by the Indian state during the post-independence period weakened the traditional social structure. While caste continue to be important social institution in the contemporary Indian society, its significance as a system of organizing economic life has nearly disappeared. The Agrarian class or caste structure is still the same, but it is not defined by caste anymore as it traditionally used to be. The landless numbers of lower caste now work with the cultivating farmers as agricultural laborers. We can therefore say that in this sense, caste has given way to class in the Indian countryside. Finally, in this unit, we have learnt about the classification of agrarian population of India into different class categories. One of well-known sociologists who has done this is Daniel Thorner. He divided agrarian class structure into three types: Maliks, Kisan and Mazdoors, based on their relationship with the land. Here we have come to end of the unit. Thanks for listening.